We're all looking for distance and we're all looking for accuracy when it comes to the tee ball. Today we're talking about how to hit the power fade because that could be the answer for you. I'm PGA teaching professional Todd Kolb, Director of Instruction for US Golf TV and the Sanford Power Golf Academy. And we're talking about the power fade today. Today we're going to talk about actually what is a power fade. We're going to talk about how to hit it. We're going to talk about strategies and ways to practice it, and also what should we be doing on the golf course when we can hit the power fade. What are scenarios that really call for the power fade? And last but not least, I'm going to give you a simple tip that can help you do it every single time. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel. This is the place for you. We're putting out great content all of the time, and we love hearing from you. Do me a favor, leave a comment, because I do my best to respond to all of them. So, power fade, what is it? Well, first of all, a fade is a ball for a right-handed golfer that starts basically straight, right? Kind of towards the target, and as it's coming to the ground, falls slightly to the right. If you're a left-handed golfer, of course, it's just the opposite. Now, a fade is different than a slice, and we've done a ton of videos on fade versus slice. All right, check those out if you want more detailed information, but a fade is a ball that just falls to the right if you're a right-handed golfer. A power fade is exactly what we're talking about, meaning speed. It's got some real speed and power to it. So that's how we would define the power fade. A ball that's got some real speed to it, but it falls slightly to the right of the target, all right, when you hit that shot. Now, a couple of things we want to talk about of how we actually hit this. First of all, it's much easier to hit a power fade with a club that has less loft. So that's why I like to talk about this with my driver, and that's typically where you see it. When you talk about players who play the game for a living and they say, hey, this guy or gal hits a power fade, they're usually talking about with the driver. It's very difficult, if almost impossible, to hit a power fade with like a 9-iron or a pitching wedge. All right, you could hit it with maybe a 3-iron or you know, maybe a hybrid, but most importantly, probably your driver is where we see it the most often. So that's kind of the club that you want to be using when you hit this. So first of all, what are some things that we can do to promote the power fade? Because I do feel like it's more accurate than drawing the ball. So I've got my live view set up. It's one of the products that I use all the time when I'm teaching. And what I love about it, multiple things, but it's basically it mirrors exactly what I'm doing. So I've got it set up right there. And the first thing we want to talk about in terms of hitting the power fade is aim. One of the easiest ways to change the curve of the golf ball is to change your aim. So I'm set up in here. All right, if this was perfectly square, and I've got this line right on here on the screen from my live view there. This is really, we're going to talk about that in just a second. But if this is straight, if I wanted to fade the golf ball, my feet are just perpendicular, nice and square to the target line. If I take my lead foot and I pull it back a little bit, now notice how my stance is open or aimed to the left. That's going to promote a swing direction where the club works out and across the ball. Now that particular motion is going to promote more of a fade. So the first tip I want to give you if you want to hit the power fade is to just simply open up your stance a little bit. All right, that's the first thing that I would do. Take your lead foot and just pull it back slightly. Another way that we can hit the power fade is to modify the grip a little bit. All right, and that can be a little bit more challenging. I'm not a big fan of changing the grip a lot, but it is something that you could look at. So basically what we would do is, all right, is just take your lead hand, so that's my left hand, and if my normal neutral grip is where I can see maybe, let's say, 2 knuckles, I'm going to take it and just turn it back a little bit. So now when I look down at my hand, maybe I see 1 knuckle. So standard grip for me would be 2 to 2.5 knuckles. If I want to hit the power fade, I'm going to take it and move it back slightly where I can only see 1 knuckle. Now what that will actually do is it makes it more difficult in the short term, to release the club head. So the club head will tend to be maybe a little bit more open, all right, at impact, and that will help you actually fade the golf ball. So the first 2 things that are super easy to do if you want to hit the power fade is to open your stance and then just weaken your grip a little bit. I like to weaken the grip with the lead hand more so than the trail hand or the bottom hand. I think that works a lot better. Now, a couple other things that you're going to want to know. In the power fade, if you're able to fade the golf ball, you can swing that club a little bit faster, I have found. Typically, you know, if the ball is falling down slightly to the right, it doesn't tend to roll out as much. So you can go ahead and swing it a little bit faster and maybe get a little bit more aggressive with it. That will help also along those lines. So let's talk about some swing strategies that we can do to help us hit that power fade. We've talked about some setup stuff, a little bit of the grip, okay, a little bit of the aim. So the first one, this is just more of a practice swing thing. I like to call it Arnie swings. Okay, we all remember Arnold Palmer, of course, one of the most famous golfers of all time. And what we remember about him, many things, but is his classic finish. When he would finish his swing, how his arms were kind of high and the club was high and his elbows were kind of separated. All right, so from down the line, when I'm set in here, this is one of the things here too. I've got my screen right here with the live view. So when I finish, all right, see how my elbows are kind of separated. The club is kind of high. What that does is that helps me actually keep the face a little bit open. So that would be a swing tip you could do, is give it the old Arnold Palmer finish. So when you finish the swing, boom, feel like your hands are kind of high, your elbows are a little bit separated. That will, in essence, actually keep the club face a little bit open and help you fade the golf ball. Another thing that I like to do is I like to actually tee the ball down a little bit. I think that helps golfers as well. We'll have them tee the ball down just a little bit, okay? From their normally we'll have you, when you tee it up, in a normal situation, you're gonna get about half the ball above the top of the club head. But if you wanna hit the power fade, I like to tee it down just a little bit so the ball's maybe more in the center of the face as it's sitting there on the ground versus up kind of high. That's another tip that we can do. So we've got a little bit of the grip. We could weaken the grip a little bit. We could open the stance just slightly, right? We could give it the Arnold Palmer finish. Those are things, all of those things would help us hit that power fade. So what are some situations where the power fade can come in handy? Well, let's think about on the golf course. Let's say you're a right-handed golfer, all right, and you've got water or some things on the right side, or you've got a hazard on the right side. One of the times that you want to actually be able to hit the power fade is in those situations where you can aim it down the left side. Okay, so in this scenario, we've got water on the right, and we've got just rough on the left. What you can do is tee up on the right side of the tee box, aim down the left side, aim into the left rough, and hit that little power fade so that that power fade works itself back into the fairway. Now, what will happen with that is that if the ball doesn't fade and just goes straight, well, then you're just in the rough, but you're not in the water. So that would be a scenario where actually hitting the power fade can help you work the ball away from the hazard initially and let it work more back towards the center of the fairway. Another time when I like to hit the power fade is wind direction. Anytime you can, if you're looking for distance, anytime you can ride the wind, okay, you want to do that. So as a right-handed golfer, when I hit a power fade, that ball works a little bit to the right. So if I'm standing on a tee box and I've got some wind that's a little bit left to right, I'm going to hit that power fade. I'm going to bust it down the left side. I'm going to let it get up nice and high in the air, and I'm going to let it ride the wind because that's going to give me some distance as well. So those are some of the ways in terms of the strategies of when you would want to use it on the golf course. Now I promised you this, that I would give you a nice simple tip that you could do on the golf course that you could immediately start hitting the power fade. Let's talk about that. So what that is, this is a tip I picked up about 20 years ago from a fellow golf instructor who showed me this when I was struggling hitting the hook. And so here's what you're going to do. So glove hand, top hand for me, left hand. I'm going to take my last three fingers, my pinky, my ring finger, my middle finger, and I'm going to grip the club, okay, as tight as I can with those three fingers right there. All right, and when I grip it really tight with those three fingers, what's going to happen is that's going to make my forearm more tense or rigid. Okay, so when I grip it really tight with those last three fingers of my lead hand, and I go ahead and I make a golf swing, what's going to happen there is because my forearm is nice and tight, it's going to make the club face more difficult for the club face to actually rotate closed. So that is a simple tip. Next time you go to the golf course, grip it really tight with the last three fingers of your lead hand. Go ahead and make your normal swing, and I'd bet dollars to donuts that that ball is going to gradually fade just a little bit. So the power fade, when we're playing around a golf, you got to have distance, but you got to have accuracy. If you're struggling with accuracy, think about hitting the fade, think about hitting the power fade. Today we've given you some really good ways to actually change your setup, okay, maybe a couple swing thoughts and a couple drills. And if you do these types of things, you can add the power fade to your game.